Revelation 2865. From the 30th of August 1943. God directs the will, volition, and accomplishment of him who freely gave himself to him. Where divine will expresses itself, human will cannot assert itself as soon as it is directed against it. God knows whose will submits itself to him, and he will only draw such a person who turns to him to a task. Thus he will obviously express himself through him. But then there is no longer any serious resistance to fear which could be directed against divine will. The human being's will is free. God does not force it at all, yet God's grace flows through such a person turned towards him. It strengthens his will and enables him to also recognize God's great love, and the more joyfully the human being's will now strives towards God. And now God can take possession of the human being's will without affecting his freedom, for the human being gave himself to him as his own. If a weakness of will occurs, however, God prevents the complete relapse because the human being himself has given him the right to do so through his voluntary surrender, for God thereby regards him as his own, which he no longer allows to be disputed. A person who was once permeated by God's strength, through whom God himself worked because he gave himself to him as his own, has become a bearer of strength and will never ever lose this strength, only he can become less aware of it because the world tries to turn his will away from God and he does not offer enough resistance. But God will never let the human being fall victim to the world. The strength from God, which has expressed itself through him, protects him from this, for the human being no longer wants to do without it, and he is much more likely to give up the world if he is confronted with the choice. For God continues to work in him and also gives him the right knowledge if he is in danger. And then wanting and accomplishing is God's working, then God also directs the human being's will, he no longer lets him fall back into the wrong will. But the first devotion to God must have taken place through the human being's will itself, otherwise God cannot take possession of him, otherwise he cannot express himself, thus God's strength cannot obviously flow over to him. And therefore the human being can be unconcerned, for God's love protects him from complete apostasy. God's love does not let the human being who threatens to become weak perish. Instead he supplies him with new strength. He obviously works and directs the will towards himself because he knows that the human being, who has already given himself to him of his own free will, is grateful to him. Amen.